The knock came soft but deliberate against the rough timber door of the cabin as snow began to fall harder across the Montana wilderness. And Adam Harper paused with his hand halfway to the pot of stew hanging over the fire, wondering who in their right mind would be traveling through these mountains in November of 1876. He set down the wooden spoon and crossed the small space in 3 long strides, his boots heavy against the plank floor. When he opened the door, the wind rushed in carrying flakes of white, and there stood a woman who looked like she had been fighting the mountain for days and losing. Her dress was torn at the hem, her shawl was threadbare, and her face was pale with cold except for 2 spots of red on her cheeks that spoke of exposure. But her eyes, green as summer grass, held his with a mixture of desperation and dignity that made his chest tighten. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite the chattering of her teeth. "I need help. I can work. I can cook, clean, mend. I just need somewhere to stay until spring." Adam stood there for a moment, taking in the sight of her. She was young, maybe 23 or 24, and despite the exhaustion etched into her features, there was something strong about her. Something that told him she had survived things that would have broken lesser people. "Come in," he said, stepping back, "before you freeze to death on my doorstep." She stumbled as she crossed the threshold, and he caught her elbow to steady her. Her skin was ice-cold even through the fabric of her dress. He guided her to the chair nearest the fire and wrapped a wool blanket around her shoulders before she could protest. "My name is Beatrice Vernon," she said, her words coming between shivers. "I came from Spokane, Washington Territory. My brother and I were traveling east, looking for work, but he took ill 3 weeks ago. He died 5 days past. I buried him near a creek about 10 miles west of here." Adam felt the weight of her words settle in the room. Death was no stranger in these mountains, but that did not make it any easier to bear. He ladled some of the hot stew into a tin bowl and placed it in her hands. "Eat," he said. "Then we will talk." She looked down at the bowl, and for a moment he thought she might cry, but instead she lifted the spoon with a trembling hand and began to eat. He watched her from where he stood by the fire, noting the way she tried to eat slowly despite her obvious hunger, the way she held herself upright even though exhaustion must have been pulling at every muscle. "I am Adam Harper," he said finally. "I have been living on this mountain for near about 6 years now. I trap, hunt, and I have been clearing land for farming come spring. It is hard work, and the winters are long." Beatrice finished the bowl and set it carefully on the small table beside her. "I am not afraid of hard work, Mr. Harper, and I meant what I said. I can earn my keep." "I do not doubt it," Adam replied, stroking his beard thoughtfully. He was 31 years old, and he had lived alone since he came to these mountains after the war. He had seen enough of civilization and its cruelties during those years of fighting. Out here, life was hard but honest. A man could build something with his own hands and know it was truly his, but winter was coming on fierce, and he knew what the woman was facing. Spokane was a good 100 miles away, maybe more depending on which route she took. The nearest town of any size was 40 miles south, and that was a rough 2-day journey in good weather. In snow like this, it could take a week or kill you trying. "I have a proposal," he said, the words coming before he had fully thought them through. But once he started, he knew it was right. "You can stay the winter and you can work if you want to, but I am not looking for a servant, Miss Vernon. I am looking for a partner." She looked up at him sharply, those green eyes suddenly wary. "What kind of partner?" "The kind who helps build a life," Adam said. He moved to the window and looked out at the falling snow. "I have been alone up here for a long time. I have built a cabin, but it could be better. I have cleared land, but I could clear more. I have plans for livestock come spring, for fields of wheat and maybe some cattle. But it is too much for one person. And the truth is, Miss Vernon, I am tired of being alone." "You are proposing marriage," Beatrice said, and her voice had gone very quiet. "I am proposing a partnership," Adam corrected, turning back to face her. "Marriage, yes, but not the kind where you are property or where you have no say. I am talking about building something together. Equal partners in life and on this land. You would have as much claim to what we build as I do." Beatrice stood up slowly, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. She walked to the other window and looked out at the darkening forest. The snow was falling heavier now, and the wind was picking up. Adam could hear it howling around the eaves of the cabin. "Why would you offer such a thing to a stranger?" she asked. "Because you knocked on my door hoping for charity, and I am offering you something better," Adam said. "Because I can see you are strong enough to survive out here. Because life is hard in these mountains, and it makes no sense to face it alone when we could face it together." She turned to look at him, and in the firelight he could see tears standing in her eyes, though she did not let them fall. "You know nothing about me. I know you buried your brother and kept going," Adam said. "I know you climbed a mountain in a storm rather than give up. I know you asked for work before you asked for food. That tells me plenty." Beatrice was silent for a long moment, her fingers clutching the blanket tighter. "My brother and I left Spokane because I refused to marry a man my father chose. He was cruel and he was old, and I knew what my life would be if I became his wife. My father disowned me when I said no. Thomas, my brother, he took my side. He gave up everything to help me, and then he died, and I thought I would die too. I thought the mountain would take me like it took him." "But it did not," Adam said gently. "No," she agreed. "I kept walking because Thomas would have wanted me to. Because he believed I deserved a life where I could make my own choices." "Then make this choice," Adam said. He crossed the room until he stood in front of her. "Stay, be my partner. Help me build something real up here. I promise you will have a voice in every decision. I promise I will treat you with respect. And I promise I will never raise a hand to you or make you regret saying yes." Beatrice looked up at him, studying his face. Adam knew what she would see. He was tall and broad-shouldered from years of hard labor. His face was weathered from sun and wind. His dark hair hung to his shoulders and his beard was thick. He looked like what he was, a man who had chosen the wilderness over civilization. But he hoped she could also see the honesty in his eyes. "I do not love you," she said finally. "I do not love you either," Adam replied. "Not yet, but I think we could get there given time. And even if we do not, we can still build a good life. We can still be partners." She held out her hand, and when he took it, her grip was firm despite the cold that still lingered in her fingers. "All right, Adam Harper, I will be your partner." They were married 3 days later by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through on his circuit. The man was surprised to find anyone living so far up the mountain, but he performed the ceremony in front of the fire while the snow continued to fall outside. Adam had no ring to offer, but he gave Beatrice a piece of leather cord with a small stone he had found in the creek, smooth and green as her eyes. She tied it around her wrist and promised to work beside him, to face whatever came as his equal partner. The first weeks were an adjustment for both of them. The cabin was small, just one room with a sleeping loft above. Adam gave Beatrice the loft and made himself a pallet by the fire, though she protested that it was his home and she should not displace him. But he insisted, and she eventually accepted, perhaps too tired to argue further. She proved herself capable from the start. She could cook better than he ever had, turning his simple ingredients into meals that actually had flavor. She mended his clothes with neat, small stitches. She kept the cabin cleaner than it had been in years. But more than that, she proved she was not afraid of the harder work. When Adam went to check his trap lines, She insisted on coming with him. The first time, he tried to convince her to stay behind where it was warm, but she gave him a look that told him she had not come all this way to sit idle. So she came, and she learned quickly. She learned to read the signs of animals in the snow, to set snares, to skin rabbits and prepare pelts. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked. Adam told her about his life before the mountain, about growing up in Ohio, about the war that had taken so much from so many. He told her about coming west afterward, unable to settle back into the life he had known before. She told him about growing up in Spokane, about her mother who had died when she was 15, about Thomas who had been her best friend as well as her brother. He was going to be a teacher, she said one night, her voice soft with grief. He loved books, loved learning. He wanted to start a school in one of the new towns, somewhere that needed one. That was our plan, to find a place where we could both start over, where I could be free and he could teach. He sounds like he was a good man, Adam said. The best, Beatrice agreed. She wiped at her eyes quickly. I am sorry. I do not mean to burden you with my sadness. It is not a burden, Adam told her. Grief is just love with nowhere to go. You loved your brother. There is no shame in mourning him. She looked at him with something new in her eyes, something like gratitude mixed with surprise. You are not what I expected when I knocked on your door. What did you expect? I do not know, she admitted. Someone harder maybe, someone who would see me as something to use. You are my partner, Adam reminded her, and partners do not use each other, they help each other. As winter deepened, they fell into a rhythm. They worked together during the day, checking traps, hauling wood, tending to the necessary tasks of survival. In the evenings, they sat together, sometimes talking, sometimes working in comfortable silence while Beatrice mended or Adam carved. The cabin felt less empty than it had in years, and Adam found himself looking forward to the sound of her voice, the sight of her sitting across from him in the firelight. One evening in late December, a storm blew in fierce and sudden. The wind screamed around the cabin, and snow piled against the door. Adam wedged logs against it to keep the cold from seeping in, and they stayed close to the fire, feeding it constantly to keep the room warm enough. Tell me about what you want to do with the land, Beatrice said, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. You said you had plans. Adam settled back against the wall and let himself imagine it out loud. I want to clear more acreage for crops, wheat mostly, maybe some corn. I want to build a proper barn and get some cattle, start a small herd. There is good grazing in the meadow to the east come summer, and I want to expand the cabin, add another room at least, maybe two, make it a real home. How much land do you have claim to? She asked. 160 acres under the Homestead Act, Adam replied. I have been here 6 years, so it is mine free and clear now, but there is more land around us that no one has claimed. If we wanted, we could expand. Beatrice looked thoughtful. What about chickens? We could have chickens for eggs, and maybe a milk cow. If you are planning to get cattle anyway, having one for milk would be practical. That is a good idea, Adam said, and he meant it. He had not thought about chickens or a milk cow, but she was right. It would make them more self-sufficient. What else? A garden, Beatrice said, and now there was excitement creeping into her voice. A real garden with vegetables, potatoes, carrots, beans, squash, maybe even some herbs, and if the growing season is long enough, tomatoes. The season is short up here, Adam warned, but we could try. Anything that works would be better than buying supplies in town. We could preserve food for winter, Beatrice continued. Can vegetables smoke meat? If we do it right, we would not have to rely so much on the trading post. Adam listened to her talk, watched the way her eyes lit up as she described the possibilities. This was what he had hoped for when he offered her partnership, someone who could see the same future he saw, who could help him build it. But it was more than that too. He found himself drawn to her energy, to the strength that kept showing through despite everything she had lost. "You are good at this," he said when she paused for breath. "At what? Planning, dreaming, building something from nothing." Beatrice smiled, and it transformed her face. "My mother used to say I had too many ideas for my own good. My father hated it. He said women should not concern themselves with business or planning. That is part of why he wanted me to marry that old man, to get me out of his house before I started getting ideas that were too big." "Your father was a fool," Adam said bluntly. "Your ideas are good ones, and up here, we need all the good ideas we can get." The storm raged for 3 days. By the time it cleared, the snow was piled so high against the cabin that they had to dig their way out. But when they finally emerged into the bright, cold sunshine, the world looked new and clean. The trees heavy with white, the sky a blue so deep it almost hurt to look at. They worked together to clear paths, to check on the small shed where Adam kept his tools and supplies, to make sure everything had survived the storm. And as they worked, Adam found himself stealing glances at Beatrice. Her cheeks were pink with cold and exertion, and strands of her dark hair had escaped from the braids she wore. She looked strong and capable and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with fine dresses or powder. That night, as they sat by the fire after supper, Beatrice said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" Adam asked. "About us, about this partnership." She hesitated, then continued. "When I agreed to marry you, I thought it would be like a business arrangement, practical. But it does not feel like that anymore." Adam's heart began to beat faster. "What does it feel like?" "Like a real marriage," she said softly. "Or at least like it could be. You have been kind to me, Adam. You have kept your promises. You treat me like an equal. And I find myself caring what you think, wanting to make you happy. Is that strange?" "No," Adam said. He set down the piece of wood he had been carving and looked at her directly. "It is not strange at all. I feel the same way." "You do?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes," he admitted. "I think I started falling in love with you the first time you insisted on coming to check the trap lines, even though it was freezing cold. Or maybe it was when you figured out how to fix the door latch that had been sticking for 2 years. Or maybe it was just every single day, a little bit at a time." Beatrice stood up and crossed the small space between them. She knelt down beside him, and her eyes were shining in the firelight. "I loved my brother. I did not think I could love anyone else, not so soon. It felt like a betrayal. But Thomas would have liked you, Adam. He would have been happy that I found someone who treats me with respect, who sees me as more than just a woman to be managed." Adam reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I do see you. I see how strong you are, how smart, how brave, and I am grateful every day that you knocked on my door." She leaned into his touch, and when she spoke again, her voice trembled slightly. "I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of losing this. Of losing you. I lost everyone else. My mother, my father, even though he is still alive, Thomas. What if the mountain takes you too? We all die someday," Adam said gently. "But we are living now. And I would rather have a life with you, however long or short it is, than spend another year alone." Beatrice closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, there was resolve in them along with the fear. "Then let this be a real marriage, not just a partnership, but everything that means." Adam pulled her closer, and when he kissed her, it was gentle at first, a question and an answer all at once. She kissed him back with a fervor that surprised them both, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Come to bed with me," she whispered. "Please." That night they climbed to the loft together, and in the warmth of the blankets, with the fire burning below and the stars visible through the small window, They became husband and wife in truth. There was tenderness in the way they touched each other, a recognition that this was important, that they were choosing each other not out of desperation but out of genuine feeling. And afterward, lying in each other's arms, Adam felt a peace he had not known since before the war. "I love you," Beatrice said into the darkness. "I love you too," Adam replied, and he meant it with everything he had. Winter slowly gave way to early spring. The snow began to melt and the creek ran high and fast with runoff. Adam and Beatrice began to plan in earnest for the work ahead. They made lists of seeds to buy, tools they would need, lumber for expanding the cabin. Adam made a trip to the trading post in mid-March, and when he returned 3 days later, he brought not just supplies but news. "There is a family settling about 15 miles north," he told Beatrice as he unloaded the packs. "Name of Wilson. They have 3 children and they are looking to farm. The trader said there might be others coming this summer. This whole area might start to grow." "That could be good," Beatrice said thoughtfully. "It would be nice to have neighbors, especially other women to talk to, though I confess I have enjoyed having you all to myself." Adam grinned at her. "You are not getting rid of me, but yes, it could be good. Means we could help each other when needed. Share equipment maybe, or labor during harvest." They spent April clearing more land. It was back-breaking work, pulling stumps and moving rocks, turning soil that had never been farmed. But they worked side by side, and in the evenings they were tired in a way that felt good and honest. Beatrice proved herself just as capable with an axe and shovel as she was with a needle and thread, and Adam fell more in love with her every day. In May, they planted their first crops. Wheat in the larger cleared field, vegetables in the garden plot Beatrice had mapped out behind the cabin. She planted potatoes and carrots, beans and squash, and even a small patch of herbs. They built a chicken coop out of rough lumber, and Adam made another trip to town, this time returning with 6 hens and a rooster in crates. "Look at us," Beatrice said, watching the chickens scratch around their new home. "We are farmers." "We are," Adam agreed. He slipped his arm around her waist and pulled her close. "Are you happy?" "Yes," she said simply. "I never thought I would be after everything that happened, but I am. You have given me something I did not think I could have." "What is that?" "A home. A real home where I belong." In June, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She had been feeling unwell in the mornings, and after a few weeks of increasing certainty, she told Adam one evening after supper. He stood there for a moment, the news sinking in, and then he swept her up into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he said when he finally set her down. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy about it?" Beatrice asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Adam said. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "A child, our child. We need to expand the cabin sooner rather than later. The baby will need a room." "The baby will not need a room for months after it is born," Beatrice said, laughing. "We have time." But Adam was already planning, already measuring the walls with his eyes and calculating lumber. Beatrice watched him with fondness. This man who had offered her partnership had given her so much more. He had given her love, a home, and now a family. True to his word, Adam began work on an addition to the cabin. He enlisted the help of their new neighbor, John Wilson, who came with his oldest son. The men worked through July and into August, and the cabin grew. They added 2 rooms, one that would serve as a proper bedroom for Adam and Beatrice, and another smaller one that would be the nursery. They also built a covered porch across the front, a place to sit on summer evenings. Sarah Wilson, John's wife, came to visit once the men started working together. She was a warm, practical woman in her 40s with a ready smile and strong opinions about everything from gardening to childbirth. She and Beatrice became fast friends, and Sarah appointed herself as Beatrice's advisor for the pregnancy. "You are young and healthy," Sarah told her during one visit. "You should do fine. But you need to make sure you are eating enough, and when the time comes, you need someone who has been through it before. I will come stay with you the last few weeks, help you with the birth." "You would do that?" Beatrice asked, touched. "Of course I would," Sarah said. "That is what neighbors do. Besides, it will be nice to have another woman around. I love my men, but sometimes a person needs female company." As summer turned to fall, the first crops came in. The wheat harvest was modest but good for a first year. The garden produced more than Beatrice had hoped, and they spent long days preserving food for the coming winter. They canned vegetables, dried beans, smoked meat from the deer Adam hunted. The chickens laid eggs faithfully, and Adam brought home a young milk cow he had traded for at the Wilson farm. "Her name is Bessie," he announced as he led the placid brown cow into the small pen he had built. "You named her," Beatrice teased. "John's daughter named her," Adam corrected. "But I think it fits." Beatrice grew rounder as autumn progressed. By October, she could no longer see her feet, and simple tasks became challenging. But she remained in good spirits, and Adam was attentive to her every need. He helped her with tasks that had become difficult, rubbed her aching back in the evenings, and talked to the baby through her belly, telling their child stories about the land they would inherit. "You are going to be such a good father," Beatrice said one night as they lay in their new bedroom, his hand resting on her stomach. "I hope so," Adam said. "I want to give our children everything. A home where they feel safe, where they can grow and learn and become whoever they are meant to be." "Children," Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "We have not even had one yet, and you are planning more." "I want a houseful," Adam admitted. "But only if you do. I know it is hard on you carrying them and birthing them." "I want more too," Beatrice said softly. "I want our children to have what I had with Thomas, siblings to love and rely on. But maybe let us get through this one first." The baby came in late November, just as the first snows of winter began to fall. Sarah Wilson arrived a week before, and she took charge with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this many times. When the labor started, she sent Adam out to chop wood, telling him firmly that he would just be in the way. "But I want to help," Adam protested. "You will help by not passing out on my floor," Sarah retorted. "Now go. We will call you when there is something to see." The labor was long and hard. Adam paced outside, chopping wood until his arms ached, splitting more logs than they would need for the entire winter. He heard Beatrice cry out at one point, and it took all his willpower not to burst through the door. But he trusted Sarah, and he trusted Beatrice to be strong. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard a new sound. A baby crying, strong and healthy. He dropped the axe and ran for the door. Sarah met him there, her face flushed but smiling. "You have a son," she said, "and your wife is fine. Tired but fine." Adam barely heard the rest. He pushed past Sarah gently and went to the bedroom. Beatrice was propped up on pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. And in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. "Adam," she said, her voice hoarse, "come meet your son." He crossed to the bed on shaking legs and looked down at the baby, his son. The child was red-faced and wrinkled with a tuft of dark hair. His eyes were squeezed shut, and his tiny fists waved in the air. "He is perfect," Adam whispered. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and reached out to touch the baby's cheek with one finger. The skin was impossibly soft. "Hold him," Beatrice said, and she transferred the warm weight into Adam's arms. Adam looked down at his son and felt something crack open in his chest. This was his child, his and Beatrice's. This tiny person was a piece of them both, a future they had built together. Tears ran down his face unchecked. "What should we name him?" he asked. Beatrice smiled. "I was thinking Thomas, after my brother, if that is all right with you." "It is perfect," Adam said. "Thomas Harper, welcome to the world, little one." That winter was different from the one before. The cabin was full of noise, the baby's cries and gurgles, the sounds of new life. Adam and Beatrice adapted to their new roles as parents, learning together. They took turns walking Thomas when he was fussy, changing his cloths, marveling at every tiny change. "He smiled at me today," Beatrice announced one morning in February. "A real smile, not just gas." "He has been smiling at me for days," Adam teased, and Beatrice swatted his arm. They were happy, genuinely happy in a way that felt both fragile and enduring. The work was still hard, the winters still long, but they faced it together. And having Thomas made everything feel more purposeful. They were not just building a farm anymore. They were building a legacy. Spring came again, and with it more work. But this time they had help. John Wilson and his sons came to assist with planting, and in return, Adam went to help them with their own fields. Beatrice, with Thomas tied to her back in a sling Sarah had shown her how to make, worked in the garden. She had expanded it this year, confident now in what would grow and what would not. As Thomas grew, he became the center of their world. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh, curious about everything. Adam carved him toys, little animals and blocks. Beatrice sewed him clothes from fabric she had bought on Adam's trips to town. They both talked to him constantly, telling him about the farm, the animals, the mountains around them. "He is going to be smart," Adam said one evening, watching Thomas try to grab at a wooden horse dangling above him. "Look at how he figures things out." "He gets that from you," Beatrice said. "No, from you," Adam countered. "You are the one with all the good ideas." "Then maybe from both of us," Beatrice said, settling the argument with a kiss. When Thomas was 6 months old, Beatrice realized she was pregnant again. She told Adam while they were working in the garden together, Thomas napping in the shade nearby. "Already," Adam said, surprised but pleased. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," Beatrice confirmed. "This one will come in the spring, I think, March or April." "2 children," Adam said wonderingly. He pulled her into his arms carefully, mindful of the dirt on his hands. "Our family is growing." "Are you happy?" Beatrice asked, though she knew the answer. "I am more than happy," Adam said. "I am blessed. You have given me everything, Beatrice. Everything I did not even know I wanted." The second baby, a girl they named Alice, came in April as Beatrice had predicted. The birth was easier than Thomas's had been, and Sarah Wilson said that was often the way of it. Alice had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair, and from the start, she was different from her brother. Where Thomas was curious and active, Alice was calm and observant. She would lie in her cradle for hours, watching the world around her with solemn attention. "She is thinking deep thoughts," Adam said, looking down at his daughter. "Planning how to run the world." "She is her mother's daughter, then," Beatrice said with a laugh. With 2 children, life became more complex. But Adam and Beatrice had found their rhythm as partners, and they worked together seamlessly. They divided tasks based on who was better at what and who had time. Adam handled more of the heavy farm work now, while Beatrice managed the house and the children and the garden. But it was not a rigid division. Adam would watch the children when Beatrice needed to focus on preserving food or mending. Beatrice would help with the animals when Adam needed an extra pair of hands. The farm grew too. Each year they cleared a little more land, planted a little more wheat. The cattle herd expanded from just Bessie to a bull and 3 more cows. They added more chickens, a few pigs. The cabin got another addition, a larger kitchen area and a small room that Adam used for working on equipment and Beatrice used for storing preserves. Other families moved into the area as well. What had once been an isolated mountain became a small community. There was talk of building a school, though it would be years before there were enough children to justify it. The families helped each other, sharing labor during harvest time, gathering for occasional celebrations. Thomas grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy who followed his father everywhere, asking endless questions about the farm and the forest. Alice was quieter but just as intelligent, and she loved to help her mother in the garden, carefully tending the plants with small, serious attention. When Thomas was 4 and Alice was 2, Beatrice had a third child, another boy they named James. He was born in the height of summer, and he came into the world screaming his displeasure at the heat. But he was healthy and strong, and Adam and Beatrice welcomed him with the practiced ease of parents who had done this before. 3 children, Beatrice said one evening, nursing baby James while Thomas and Alice played on the floor nearby. "I think we might be done. Are you sure?" Adam asked. He was mending a harness, his hands working automatically while he watched his family. "I thought you wanted a houseful." "We have a houseful," Beatrice pointed out, "and I am not getting any younger. I will be 30 next year." "You are still young," Adam said, but he understood. Childbirth was always a risk, and 3 healthy children was a blessing not to be taken lightly. "Whatever you want is fine with me. You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible." They settled into the years of raising children and building their farm. The work never stopped, but it was good work. Adam taught Thomas how to tend the cattle, how to fix equipment, how to read the weather. Beatrice taught Alice how to cook and preserve food, how to sew and mend, how to tend a garden. Both parents taught all their children to read and do arithmetic, using the few books they owned and making up lessons as they went. The children grew strong and capable. Thomas developed his father's build and his mother's quick mind. He loved the farm and told anyone who would listen that he was going to run the best ranch in Montana someday. Alice was quieter, more interested in the plants and animals than in the business of farming, but she was reliable and thoughtful, the one who remembered things others forgot. James, the baby, was charming and mischievous, with a laugh that could brighten the darkest day. Adam and Beatrice grew older too, but their love deepened with time. They still worked side by side every day, still talked by the fire every evening. They knew each other completely, the good and the bad, the strengths and the weaknesses. And they loved each other not despite those things but because of them. "Do you remember when I first knocked on your door?" Beatrice asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. The children were inside, supposedly preparing for bed, though Adam could hear them still talking and giggling. "I remember thinking you looked like you had been fighting a losing battle," Adam said. "But I also remember thinking your eyes were the greenest thing I had ever seen." "I was so desperate," Beatrice said softly. "I thought I was going to die on this mountain. I thought I had lost everything." "And instead you found everything," Adam said. He took her hand and laced their fingers together. "We both did." "I never thanked you properly," Beatrice said. "For offering me partnership instead of charity, for seeing me as an equal when so many men would not have." "You thanked me every day," Adam said. "By being who you are, by building this life with me, by giving me a family and a home that is more than just a cabin in the woods." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun finished setting and the stars began to appear. From inside, they heard Sarah call out that the children were finally in bed. They had hired her oldest daughter, also named Sarah, to help around the house now that there were 3 children and a farm that kept expanding. "We did well," Beatrice said finally. "Did we not?" "We did better than well," Adam replied. "We built something real, something that will last." And it did last. Years flowed past, marked by seasons of planting and harvest, by winters around the fire and summers working in the sun. Thomas grew into a young man, tall and strong like his father, and he began courting the daughter of a neighboring farmer. Alice discovered a talent for healing, and became the person people came to when they were sick or injured, learning everything she could from the few medical books they could acquire. James, as he grew, showed an interest in mechanics and engineering, always tinkering with equipment and finding ways to make things work better. Adam and Beatrice watched their children grow with pride. They attended Thomas's wedding when he was 22, welcoming their new daughter-in-law into the family. They helped Alice set up a small clinic in what had become a proper town, the community having grown enough to need such things. They encouraged James when he announced he wanted to go to school in Spokane to study engineering, even though it meant he would be away for 2 years. Through it all, Adam and Beatrice remained partners. Their hair turned gray, their faces lined with age, but they still worked together every day. They passed more of the heavy labor to Thomas and his wife, to the hired hands they could now afford, but they still tended the garden together, still made decisions together, still sat on the porch every evening when weather allowed. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire community gathered for a celebration. 3 generations of families they had helped settle in the area came to honor them. There was food and music, dancing and stories. Someone had even hired a photographer from Spokane, and the man set up his camera to take pictures of the couple. "Smile," he instructed as Adam and Beatrice stood together in front of their cabin, which had grown into a substantial house over the years. They smiled, but not because they were told to. They smiled because they were genuinely happy, because they were exactly where they wanted to be, with exactly who they wanted to be with. "Who would have thought," Beatrice said later that night after everyone had gone home and they were preparing for bed, "when I knocked on your door 25 years ago that it would lead to all this." "I thought about it," Adam said. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, removing his boots with the careful movements of a man whose joints ached more than they used to. "Not the details maybe, but I knew you were special the moment I saw you. I knew that if you stayed, we could build something good." "You offered me partnership," Beatrice said, coming to sit beside him. "And you gave me love. You gave me everything, Adam Harper." "We gave each other everything," Adam corrected. He put his arm around her and pulled her close. "That is what partners do. They live to see their grandchildren." Thomas and his wife had 4 children, and they ran the farm with the same care and dedication Adam and Beatrice had shown. Alice never married but adopted 2 orphan children from Spokane, raising them with the same compassion she showed her patients. James returned from school with a degree and a wife he had met there, and they settled on a piece of land Adam deeded to them, building a farm that used some of the new techniques James had learned. On a cool autumn evening when Adam was 65 and Beatrice was 63, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The mountains were brilliant with fall colors, the aspens gold and the maples red. From inside the house, they could hear their daughter-in-law cooking dinner, their grandchildren playing. "I am tired," Adam said softly. It was not a complaint, just a statement of fact. "I know," Beatrice said, taking his hand. "So am I." "But it is a good tired," Adam said. "The kind that comes from a life well lived." "Yes," Beatrice agreed. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I have no regrets, Adam, not a single one." "Neither do I," Adam said. He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her that was as familiar to him as his own. "You made my life worth living, Beatrice Vernon Harper, from the moment you knocked on my door." "And you made mine worth saving," Beatrice replied. "You saw me when I was lost and desperate, and you offered me not charity but dignity. You offered me partnership and gave me love." They sat together as the sun set, their hands clasped, their hearts full. Behind them was a lifetime of work and joy, of challenges met and overcome. Before them was whatever time remained to be faced as they had faced everything else together. Adam Harper lived to be 71 years old. He died peacefully in his sleep on a winter morning, his wife of 31 years beside him. Beatrice grieved him deeply, but she also celebrated him. She told their children and grandchildren stories about the man who had offered a desperate woman partnership instead of charity, who had built a farm and a family and a legacy on a Montana mountain. Beatrice herself lived to be 76. She remained in the house she and Adam had built, cared for by her children and grandchildren who loved her fiercely. On her last day, surrounded by family, she smiled and said, "I am going to see Adam now, and Thomas. I have missed them." She closed her eyes and slipped away peacefully, and if anyone had asked, they would have said she looked happy. The farm remained in the family for generations. The house where a desperate woman once knocked seeking charity became a landmark, a symbol of what could be built with hard work and partnership and love. The story of Adam and Beatrice was passed down through the years, told and retold until it became part of the family mythology. And if you traveled to that part of Montana even now, you would find a marker on that land. It sits near where the original cabin stood, and it bears both their names along with a simple inscription chosen by their children. She knocked hoping for charity. He offered partnership in life and on the land. Together, they built a legacy of love. It was a fitting end to a story that began with a desperate knock on a door, and a man brave enough to offer something better than what was asked for. Adam Harper saw in Beatrice Vernon not someone to be pitied, but someone to be partnered with. And Beatrice saw in Adam not just a refuge from the storm, but a man worthy of her respect and eventually her love. They built their life together on that mountain, raised their children together, faced every challenge together. They proved that the best partnerships are built not on desperation or convenience but on mutual respect, shared labor, and genuine affection that grows over time into something deep and enduring. Their story was one of many that played out across the American West in those years following the Civil War, as people sought new beginnings in hard country. But it was special in its own way, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come not from taking what you can get, but from offering what you can give. Adam offered Beatrice partnership when she asked for charity. In return, she gave him love, family, and a home that was more than just walls and a roof. Together they created something that lasted not just their lifetimes but generations beyond, a farm that flourished, a family that grew strong, and a love story that became legend. The mountains that had nearly claimed Beatrice that November day in 1876 became her home. The cabin where she arrived desperate and alone became filled with laughter and warmth and life. And the man who opened the door to her knock became her partner, her lover, her husband, and her best friend. In the end, that is what their story was really about. Not just survival, though they did that. Not just building a farm, though they did that too. It was about two people who chose each other, who worked together, who loved each other through all the years of their lives. It was about partnership in its truest form, where both people gave everything and both received everything in return. They lived well, and they died well, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and the love of their family. And if such a thing as a happy ending exists in this world, then Adam and Beatrice Harper found it together on that Montana mountain. In that house they built, living the life they created through hard work and unwavering partnership. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the farm that continued to flourish, in the community they helped build. But more than that, it lived on in the example they set, of what was possible when two people treated each other as true equals, when they built together instead of one ruling over the other, when they chose partnership over power and love over convenience. Years after both were gone, their great-grandchildren would still tell the story. How their great-grandmother knocked on a door hoping for charity. How their great-grandfather offered her something far better. How together they built not just a farm but a family, not just a house but a home, not just a marriage but a partnership that sustained them through every season of their lives. It was a good story. It was a true story. And it was a love story in the best sense of the word, where love was not just a feeling but an action, a choice made every day to stand beside your partner and face whatever came together. The mountains of Montana stood witness to it all, unchanging and eternal. The seasons continued their cycle, winter into spring into summer into fall and back again. The farm continued to prosper under new hands. The house continued to shelter new generations. But the memory of Adam and Beatrice remained, a testament to what two people could build when they started with respect, added partnership, and seasoned it all with love that grew deeper with every passing year. They had lived fully and loved completely, and in the end, that was the greatest legacy they could have left behind.